Albert Breer joining us here on the Rich Eisen Show from the MMQB. Happy New Year to you, Albert.
Happy New Year, Rich.
Right back at you. Okay, so let's start with the coaching vacancies right now. The one that really surprised me today was Adam Gase. Why did the Dolphins fire him, Albert? What happened there?
I think above anything else, Steve Ross wasn't happy with the climate in his building. And, really, I think this is about unifying football operations. And, about a week ago, it seemed as if Mike Tannenbaum would be the one that was out. And then I know that ownership there heard some chatter that Adam Gase, could wind up garnering interest from other teams. And there was the question, are you going to take the 53 away from Adam Gase, control the 53-man roster away from him? And if you do that, would Adam Gase try to escape? And it was just, there were so many moving parts there, Rich. So if you're going to get rid of Mike or reassign Mike, and then you're looking at bringing Adam back, and you get the sense that maybe he doesn't want to be there, and you have this feeling that things might be a little unhealthy on the football side of your building to begin with, what do you do? And I think what Stephen Ross decided to do here was to take the one guy who's been a unifying force in that building, and that side of the building, and the general manager, Chris Breer, and put him in charge. And so I think it really just boiled down to, an owner who's seen strife in football operations before, seeing it start to crop up again and trying to nip it in the bud as quickly as he could.
Okay, so which team has yet to fire a coach, do you think? Or do you think the 8 vacancies that we have now in the Browns, Jets, Broncos, Bengals, Dolphins, Packers, Cardinals, and Bucks are going to be the only ones? What do you think?
My sense right now, the other ones we were keeping an eye on, of course, there's like some low-level buzz on the Vikings. I think Mike Zimmer's safe there. Carolina, Ron Rivera's safe there. The Jaguars, of course, there's been some talk that there could be some change at different levels of the organization now, but the guys in charge are going to stick around there. I really still think, Rich, the one name to watch, the one name to continue to watch is John Harbaugh. There were lots of teams that have been sort of doing their research over the last couple of months that were gearing up for a run at John Harbaugh. And I just look at the landscape and some of the names out there, and I don't think these teams are going to quit on the idea of going after John Harbaugh whenever the Ravens are out of the playoffs.
What?
And so,
how's that possible, Albert?
Now, here's the thing, Rich, okay? Like, what you want to watch here is, does he sign an extension or does he not sign an extension? Because things haven't been perfect for John there the last couple of years. And so, does he want more control? How does he want things set up under the new general manager, Eric Acosta? This is going to be a different organization than it was under Ozzie Newsome for all of those years. And so, I think that there are some things that need to get right there before John decides, I'm going to go forward with this and sign an extension. And one thing that obviously exacerbates all of this is the fact that he knows he'd have options in other places. And so I'm not saying anything's going to happen. I think ownership loves John Harbaugh,
right,
and wants John Harbaugh back as the coach. What I would tell you is that, John Harbaugh does have a hammer here, in that there's only 1 year left on his contract, and he knows there's interest out there. And so what I will tell you is that there are teams that are closely monitoring what's going on, and teams like the Jets, like the Dolphins, like the Buccaneers, like the Broncos that, had planned to make a run or take a hard look at bringing John Harbaugh in as their next head coach, who I don't think are quite ready to give up on the idea of it yet.
Well, that we'd have to be talking multiple firsts, right? We'd have to be talking like a Gruden to Tampa Bay situation, Albert, right?
Wouldn't we? We have seen anything like this before. And, I think you got to give Steve Bisciotti some credit here, too, in handling this the way that he's handled it over the last month, because my understanding is he sort of took a look at this, and I think about 7 weeks ago we were driving towards a potential mutual parting of ways, and I think Steve Bisciotti definitely got wind of the fact that there were lots of teams that were sort of circling around his head coach, and I think he looked out there at the landscape and what's out there, as far as head coaching candidates, and says, well, wait a second, like, this isn't a great market for head coaches to begin with. And I'm going to let my guy go and be the number one candidate out there. That doesn't make any sense at all, And so I think Steve Bisciotti deserves some credit for kind of reining this thing back in. And, look, John's done a great job over the last 2 months of the year, reconfiguring the offense around Lamar Jackson and putting them in a position to make a playoff run. And so, I think the question here is really going to be whether or not, the Ravens can get John Harbaugh an extension whenever the season's over. And if they can't get him signed to extension, I would expect that there would be some teams, and a lot of this depends on timing, of course. The Ravens are out this weekend, and that's different than the Ravens being out 3 weeks from now.
Of course.
But, if the timing lines up, I could certainly see if John decides to balk at the idea of signing an extension there, where you're going to have some other suitors lining up with draft picks saying, what's it going to take for us to get John Harbaugh out of Baltimore?
Albert Breer of the MMQB here on the Rich Eisen Show. What's going on in Pittsburgh? I'm hearing about a lot of dysfunction in that locker room that we don't know about. That's typical of Mike Tomlin to keep it in-house and try and put it together. But I'm hearing he's having more and more difficulty trying to squeeze toothpaste back in the tube over there. Albert, what are you hearing?
Yeah, and here's what's complicated about it for the Steelers. They've always had these sorts of head coaches, right? From Chuck Noll to Bill Cowher to Mike Tomlin, they've always had guys who are sort of the battleship commander types who can handle big personalities and can manage groups of people. And that's always allowed them to cast a very wide net from a talent standpoint. And so they've been able to keep a lot of things in-house over the course of the last 2 years with big personalities like Le'Veon Bell, like Antonio Brown. It's allowed them to take risks on guys like Martavius Bryant. Ben Roethlisberger hasn't always been the easiest guy to deal with. And so the one thing that's interesting about their situation is that I don't know that you can take that roster and transfer it onto another head coach and expect the same sort of results that Mike Tomlin's gotten. They've really built that roster for Mike Tomlin, where he is uniquely qualified, I think, to manage the big personalities in that building. And so I certainly could see some staff changes coming. I wouldn't be totally shocked if Keith Butler winds up retiring or there's some sort of parting there. I think there are going to be some changes, and I think there will be a little bit of a shaking up of the way things are being done there. I don't anticipate there being any wholesale changes at the top levels of the organization, just because they're set up in such a unique way where, I think, Mike Tomlin's uniquely qualified to lead that group of people.
Okay, so now obviously word is on the street that the Browns are interviewing Mike McCarthy. There was also a report out of the state of Arizona that it's actually a done deal. Where do things stand on the coaching searches that have been open the longest on Green Bay and Cleveland, as best you could tell right here the day after the season, Albert?
Yeah, Cleveland's wide open. And I would say Cleveland's going to look at offensive coaches. I think Adam Gase will be in play there. I think they'll look at defensive coaches. They'll look at guys who aren't coordinators right now, like Dan Campbell. And I also expect them to look in the college ranks. I've heard for 2 months now that Matt Campbell at Iowa State is somebody that they're pretty hot on. And so, the Browns have planned all along to have a wide open process, and that'll include, the two guys in-house, Greg Williams and Freddie Kitchens, and that's the way I'd expect them to go forward. The Packers are pretty far along. They've already brought in some guys and interviewed them, and they've sort of set it up so they're going to be able to move fairly quickly. Josh McDaniels is high on their list because there's the recognition in that building. There aren't that many people on the planet capable of coaching someone like Aaron Rodgers, and Josh obviously has the unique experience of having coached Tom Brady, which would kind of put him in that category. There's Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern, who has the connection to Mark Murphy. Mark Murphy actually elevated him into the head coaching role at Northwestern. And so, I think the Packers are a little further along. The Browns are committed to doing a wide open search and looking under every rock. And, I think that John Dorsey wants to think outside the box with this hire. The Packers, I think, are a little bit more streamlined and a little further down the road, and I could see them making a hire a little bit quicker. And then you mentioned Mike McCarthy. I think McCarthy is the one right now that a lot of people are looking at. And I think I put Arizona in this category. I put Tampa in this category. The New York Jets potentially, where teams are starting to look at Mike McCarthy and say, "Is this Andy Reid?" Nobody was looking at Andy Reid as this offensive innovator 6 years ago when the Eagles fired him. But he took the opportunity to sort of reinvent himself and infuse new ideas into what he was doing, and it's been incredible for 6 years in Kansas City. A lot of people look at Andy Reid and Mike McCarthy the same way, as a guy who's capable and smart enough to reinvent himself. And so, like someone like Arizona, who struck out on Andy Reid 6 years ago, is going to look at it. Tampa, I think, is looking for a name hire. I mentioned John Harbaugh there. I think Mike McCarthy's in the mix in Tampa as well. And the Jets sort of see him as somebody who could be a stabilizing force. So you mentioned McCarthy. I think his name's going to be out there, and he's going to have plenty of opportunity.
Well, why wouldn't the Jets look at Gase? I mean, Gase knows how to beat New England clearly in his own building, and he knows the division. I mean, why wouldn't the Jets try and see? All right, let's hook Gase up with Sam Darnold right now.
I think Gase will be in play in both New York and Cleveland, and I think that's very much about the young quarterbacks and about some of the connections in those two buildings to Adam Gase. Look, I mean, with Jimmy Haslam, it goes back to the relationship with Peyton Manning and Peyton Manning having the relationship with Adam Gase. I mean, Gase actually came on to Haslam's radar in 2014 when he hired Mike Pettin. Gase actually declined an interview request there, then interviewed in Cleveland in 2016. So they've gone down this road a couple times. I could certainly see that happening. And I think the Jets are in play too. I do know that the Jets last week, when all this was going on, the tumult in the Miami building, the Jets had done some research on Adam Gase. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they're prepared to bring him in pretty quickly.
Okay. Albert Breer here on the Rich Eisen Show. I do remember a time, as I see McDaniel's name out there with a handful of places.
Yep.
I do remember a time when he left an NFL team in the lurch so unprecedentedly, Albert, that the prevailing wisdom was he would never get a coaching interview again. So I guess nobody's concerned that what happened with the Colts anymore. Is that basically what's happening?
People have short memories. I would say this. I think if you talk to Chris Ballard about it, right? Like, he was the one who was most affected by this because he's the one who had to restart the coaching search at a very difficult time to do that at the beginning of February, right? Like, I think if you talk to Chris Ballard about it, what he would tell you is that there were some fit issues that they just didn't address quickly enough during that process, and that everyone wound up getting the best result. And I don't even think this is about power, Rich. I think this is about structural stuff, like who hires the trainers, who hires the strength coaches, how is the program set up? And, in some organizations, the organizations Chris Ballard's been in, the general manager does that. And in other organizations, the head coach is in charge of everything like that. And that's, obviously where Josh has been. And so I think there was a little bit of a philosophical divide there that for one reason or another, and those two had been talking for 8-9 months, but for one reason or another, that didn't come up till the very end. And because of that, you get to the end and Josh gets cold feet and, the Crafts swoop in and they say, okay, well, what do you think about this to stay? Because they really wanted to have some sort of, young talent on their coaching staff coming up. And, obviously you get the result that you get. But I think that there are some teams that if they, sit down with Chris Ballard and talk to Chris Ballard, would get some reasonable answers and probably already have gotten some reasonable answers on why things went down the way they did last year.
All right, Albert, ask the poll question of Albert as we send him out the door. Christopher, go for it.
All right, Albert, what's the best job available? Browns, Broncos, Cardinals, Jets, Packers?
Cleveland. I love the Cleveland job because I think Baker Mayfield's a superstar. I like a lot of the young talent on their team, from Myles Garrett to Larry Ogunjobi to Joe Schobert to Denzel Ward, Jabril Peppers, Jarvis Landry. They've got a lot of good, under 26 talent on their roster, and they've got a ton of money to spend. And so for the first time in a long time, because that was seen as a bad job in a few of these recent cycles, I think the Cleveland job is the number one job in the market. And I think that's going to be reflected in the names that you see that are going to be pursuing that job.
I agree, Albert. You're right. Mayfield's a star. And at this point last year, nobody thought he was number one overall pick. Nobody. Not a single human being. I don't even know if John Dorsey did.
I'll tell you this, Rich. Last year at this point, I remember putting him at the bottom of the first round of a mock draft, right around Christmas, New Year's. I put him at the 26th, 27th pick, and people thought I was crazy for that. So it's amazing how much that's evolved. And what will be fascinating, too, is to see how this affects the way teams look at quarterbacks going forward. If this could change the way that teams evaluate quarterbacks as they come out over the next few years.
Albert, Happy New Year to you, and enjoy the Rose Bowl. I hope.
Thanks, Brett.
Enjoy it. Soak it in, man. Soak it in. Enjoy it.
I appreciate that. And you enjoy basketball season because you guys really have something going there.
Albert, look at us. Look at us.
How about that?
Look at us. Yeah, you got it. Take care, Albert. We'll chat down the line.
All right.
You got it. That's Albert Breer.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.